We're heading up north to the United Kingdom today, where we're going to be looking at the Scottish Premiership. From the nation's historic capital of Edinburgh, to the Mull of Kintyre, the Highlands, the Lowlands, and the many islands that surround Scotland, you'll find a passion for football that you would expect from a British country. While they might not have the population to support stadiums as big as their southern neighbours England, they more than make up for this in the passion for the game and the desire to support their home nation. While some Scots prefer just to watch rugby, there's nothing that can be celebrated more than a victory over England. With 4 tiers of professional football, only the top tier is available on FIFA. And despite the Scottish Premier Division officially only beginning in 2013, the football has actually been played in Scotland since 1873. Initially, a lot of the football in Scotland was played as just friendly matches, as the league did not begin until 1890, as some 17 years after the first clubs were found. But this didn't stop the Scottish national team turning over the creators of football, England's national team, several times in the decades to follow. In the 123 seasons that's passed since, there have been 12 different winners of the Scottish top flight, with the most recent being Celtic in 2020. Rangers hold the record for the most titles, with 54 times champion, including 1 shared with Celtic, and they look likely to add to this in 2021. But in this video, I'm not going to include the Old Firm, because I think that rivalry deserves its own video that I'll put out in a couple of days. We're going to be talking about some of the teams you might not know quite as much about, such as Aberdeen, who were the last winners outside of the Old Firm back in 1985. Other former winners of the Championship who are still in the league include Aberdeen, Dundee United, Kilmarnock, Hibernian and Motherwell, with Hearts dropping down into the second tier last season. As you can tell, it's been a long time since most of these teams won their titles, with only Aberdeen's 85 and Dundee's 83 titles being in the last 50 seasons. In a broad sense, this means that any of these teams would be perfect for a fallen giant challenge, although maybe it would be hard to justify that they are giants after this long outside of glory. I'm going to give you a brief introduction why you should pick each one of these 5 teams for your career mode, and I'm also going to mention the ultimate road to glory option if you do choose the Scottish League. But first, we're going to have a look at the squad rules for playing in Scotland. Of course, this is the same for every team in the league, so it doesn't matter if you're playing as Rangers or Celtic, or Kilmarnock or Hamilton, it's the same for you. Simply put, in the SPL, there are no restrictions for clubs buying players in any way. The only rule on signing players is general Scottish employment law, which of course I'm not an expert, so we can't really go into on this video. But there's no salary caps, no age restrictions, no restrictions for the size of the playing squad, or restrictions on numbers of players from other countries. Of course, there are times in Scottish football where teams have become heroic by using players within a certain distance of their team, such as the Lisbon Lions, so if you want to try and enforce one of these rules on just to your club, then feel free. So with such a relaxed squad rules, you can probably expect each team's going to set up slightly different. In the past, teams like Hearts have gone for a Lithuanian core, which was thanks to their chairman being from Lithuania. Of course, Rangers usually have a more diverse set of players than Celtic do, who like to focus on Scottish and Irish players. And most of the teams that get promoted from the Scottish Championship will be formed of mainly just Scottish and English players, with a few Welsh, Irish and Northern Irish players. Despite it not being too popular around Europe, of course, in Scotland, the SPL is the most popular league to watch. But who are the Scots watching when they turn on the football? So we're going to begin in alphabetical order of these previous champions, with Aberdeen. Of course, Aberdeen won their title with Sir Alex Ferguson as their manager back in the 80s. Aberdeen are the 3rd most successful team in Scotland behind the Old Firm, and they are the most recent team to win the title. As somewhat of a rarity in Scottish football, Aberdeen don't actually have too many strong rivalries. Scotland, of course, is a fairly small country, and most of the teams will find themselves congregated in the lowlands in 1 or 2 big cities. But despite this, Aberdeen don't have anyone that close. The nearest teams to them are Dundee and Dundee United, and despite Dundee and Dundee United hating each other more than they hate Aberdeen, this was also known as the New Firm in the 1980s. From the 1990s onwards, Rangers actually surpassed Dundee United as their rivals, but despite the rivalry being quite fierce, it does not match that of the Old Firm. As with most teams in Scotland, Aberdeen don't actually have too much money to try and fend off either English teams or bigger Scottish teams from signing their players. So if you do choose to play in Scotland, most of the time you'll have bigger teams trying to sign your players. This can be seen recently with Scott McKenna heading south to Nottingham Forest, but you'll probably see something similar happening soon with Lewis Ferguson and Dean Campbell heading south to England to try and fulfill their potential. Speaking of potential, Aberdeen do have a lot of it. They have a fairly good youth academy, probably one of the best in Scotland, so it makes sense to use that and buy as many youth scouts as you can to around 3-star ratings. Moving down to the capital, you have the best team from Edinburgh, Hibs. Also known as Hibernian, they currently have the joint third best squad in the whole of the Scottish Premier League along with Aberdeen. Again, they have quite a lot of potential in their players with Josh Doig, Jackson Irvine, Kevin Nesbitt, and Mecca Halberg all being good enough to get into a Premier League team eventually, and Ryan Porteous especially going to be a big name in football one day. The 4-time Scottish League champions were most recently champions in 1952. 3 of those 4 championships were won between 48 and 52 when the club had the services of the famous 5. This, of course, was Gordon Smith, Bobby Johnson, Laurie Riley, Eddie Turnbull and Willie Ormond. You'll be able to find all 5 of these players in the Scottish Hall of Fame, so maybe you can try and sign 5 players, keep them throughout your whole career mode, and make a second famous 5. In the last few seasons of the famous 5 playing for Hibernian, they made it to the semi-finals of the European Cup in its inaugural season. They lost to Stade Reims, and since haven't appeared again in the European Cup. The goal of this, of course, is to try and beat this and get one better by getting to the final or eventually winning the UEFA Champions League. Famous for playing in their bright orange kit, we're going to have a look at Dundee United quickly now. Headed up by Lawrence Shankland, who has a pretty unbelievable record of scoring goals in the Scottish Championship, Dundee United share their city with rivals Dundee FC and have the 2 closest grounds in British football. As you've probably come to expect so far, Dundee have a very Scottish team, but they do have a couple of American centre midfielders in Ian Harkes and Dylan Powers. While they might not be the 2 most talented players in the whole league, there's definitely room for you to try and make an American stamp on your Dundee United save. With 2 very unique nicknames in the Terrors and the Tangerines, the goal for playing as Dundee United is to try and win your second title, with the first being in 1982, and similarly to Hibs, try and make it to the European Cup final to try and make up for the 1983-4 season where they made it to the semi-final. They also made it to the final of the UEFA Cup, which is now the Europa League, in 1987, but didn't win that. So that's another goal if you can't make it to the European Cup because the old firm are blocking the spots. Of course, the main branding of the Europa League is orange, so maybe that's perfect for the Tangerines to storm to success. Sticking to a orangey red colour, we're now going to have a quick look at Motherwell FC. Motherwell won their only Scottish League title in 1932, so we're coming up on 90 seasons since they last tasted domestic glory. They won the Scottish Cup in 1991, but since then, they haven't won a single thing. They definitely have a poorer squad compared to the 3 teams we've already mentioned, and they don't have too much potential coming through over the next few seasons either. Alan Campbell and Liam Kelly both have decent potential, but outside of that, Liam Donnelly is getting old and probably won't reach his potential. Jake Hasty doesn't have too much to start off with, and Barry Maguire is the only other player who could reach over 70 without excess training in FIFA. Compared to the other teams, the challenge with Motherwell is simple. You just need to win the Scottish Premier League for a second time. As I previously mentioned, there is also a Road to Glory option in the Scottish Premier League. We have Hamilton Academical, who have by far the worst team in the league. They have players rated under 60 starting for them in both forward positions, a 60 rated defensive midfielder, another 60 rated right midfielder and a 58 rated player playing for them at centre back. With the highest rated player being a 31-year-old with 64 overall, the chances are you're going to struggle when you're playing as Hamilton. But where's the fun in FIFA if there isn't a bit of struggle to go along with it? With this, you also have the chance to try and surpass a 74 average overall Celtic or a 73 overall Rangers team with your team that starts off with just 61 average rating. Hamilton also have 2 fairly nice kits that don't clash with any in the league, so that's another positive if you do try and do this challenge. They have a very English squad too, so if you were playing as Hamilton Academical, I would probably try and scout League 1 and 2 and see if there's any players you can pick up with better potential or overall ability than the ones you already have. They do have some good talent outside the team, with Regan Minmore, and also Ross Cunningham will probably be at the Celtic Rangers level when they hit their peak. Jamie Hamilton will probably be a lower Premier League level team player, as will 60 rated right midfielder Lewis Smith. If you can manage to win the Scottish Premier League like they just recently won the Scottish Championship, then you will have surpassed any expectations of you when you took over Hamilton Academical. Of course, as you probably expect with the name, they are related to higher education too, so if you want to try and just sign players under 18 and pretend they're coming to your university team, then that could be a fun challenge to spice it up too. But that's it for my video on the Scottish Premier League. Of course, I have a video coming out on Celtic and Rangers too, but I thought it would just make this video too long to include all the history and why they're rivals in this video. It's already pretty long as it is, and I didn't want to bore you to death by making you sit through a 25-minute FIFA video, but if you have managed to sit through the 11 minutes that I've already made now, then please feel free to give me a like and subscribe for more videos like this. Hopefully you'll be back for another team guide coming up soon. Next on my list is probably going to be the MLS going more in depth into each division there, so the East and West divisions, and after that I'm going to do one on the Chinese leagues. So if you have any divisions that you want me to have a look at quickly, then drop them in the comments or message me on my Discord. But for now, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.